In between the never-ending lineup of meetings, her week was planned with a few purposeful open slots so that she could focus on several opportunities on the horizon. She wanted to follow up with the enabling technology contractor, and she was going to proactively look into a better scheduling software. She also planned to touch base with the assistant director about a possible partnership with the local community college. But her week did not go as planned. Instead, she found herself jumping between conversations with various levels of staff as she sorted out a, quote, personality conflict between two DSPs and all the drama that came with it. She also spent the week supporting a manager who frequently needed extra help just to keep her own responsibilities in order. And to top it all off, she had to deal with an allegation of abuse that partially resulted from stretching staff too thin. So much for chasing opportunities. Instead, she was just fighting fires. Hello, Difference Maker, and welcome to IDD Leader, the podcast that's all about helping IDD providers retain and grow their DSP workforce using behavioral science. I'm your host, Nate Beers, and if you can relate to the intro story, I've got some good news for you. Today, I'm going to talk with you about how you can stop the next 100 fires before they start. Do you feel like a firefighter all too often? We all know that leadership sometimes involves putting out other people's fires. But if it's happening too frequently, then this episode is for you. No, I'm not going to cover personal productivity or talk about setting boundaries, although those also might help in the firefighting department. But I am going to talk about something that's far more systemic than just a few personal changes you could make. When every supervisor in your organization regularly conducts high impact supervisions, the impact is really quite game-changing. Your number of avoidable fires will plummet, and employee retention, engagement, satisfaction, these things will rise. And it might not always happen in the same order, but there are critical steps that you can take to get every supervisor in your agency conducting high-impact supervisions. That's the goal here, and we're going to take a look at that process. Years ago, I used to live in wildfire country. That part, on the left side of the country, where big fires can just rage uncontrollably. Well, one time, a really, really big wildfire was raging close to my workplace and not very far from my home. Every morning, for 2 months, we woke up to a blanket of smoke all over the land. And nearly every evening until the end of those 2 months, we could see 10-story flames. If you were at my workplace after dark, they were rising from the ridge right across the way. It was, as someone raised on the East Coast, it was kind of a wild experience. I wasn't sure if this was sort of apocalyptic and the whole town was going to burn down, but a number of the folks around me were pretty calm, which threw me off. But nonetheless, there was quite a bit of anxiety in the town, and nearly 5,000 firefighters had gathered at where they had set up the home base and where they were fighting this fire for week upon week upon week until they finally got containment. And then eventually, once the late fall rains and snow kicked in, that's when the fire actually went out. Fires are dangerous. They're damaging. They're disruptive. And they're really expensive. In a society, it's difficult to incentivize everyone to prevent them. I mean, you're not going to hand out a gift card. Oh, good job. You didn't start a wildfire today. But thankfully, in an organization, we actually can set up a system that drastically reduces fires, or if you'd rather the word crises, and we can incentivize people to do their part within that system. So we're actually at a distinct advantage. Clear, open, and honest communication, including feedback between supervisors and employees, will prevent the majority of staff-related crises and drama from ever blowing up. But if we were to try to define communication or open communication, or if we're trying to get all supervisors to engage in this complex set of skills all the time, it's just too general to really target it. We're going to feel like a chicken running around with its head cut off. How are you going to make sure everybody in your whole agency is just communicating really well all the time? It's too vague to measure. But if, in contrast to that, if we train, expect, and reward supervisors for engaging in one high-impact supervision touchpoint with each of their direct reports every month, that difference maker is entirely doable. It's very specific, it's very measurable, and it's very rewardable. I don't even know if that's a word. So let me start by defining high-impact supervisions. There are three components. Number one is that feedback is given. The majority of this feedback should be positive. It should be something that the direct report looks forward to when they're meeting with their supervisor, that they're going to hear all the great things that they're doing right. Wins will be celebrated, and much more along those lines. There's also some two-way feedback that's happening as well in high-impact supervisions. It's not a monologue or a one-way conversation. The second aspect that defines a high-impact supervision is that tools are given or are pointed to or are directed or problems are solved, would be another way to put it. The direct reports are given the tools that they need. So their concerns, their challenges, their little stuck spots, all those kinds of things are getting addressed. Not just the supervisor doesn't necessarily have to be the one to solve all of that. They just are there to support their direct report in them getting it solved. And at times, absolutely, they'll step in and help to solve it as well. When the everyday worker, when your DSPs are set up for success to do their job, they're given everything that they need to do it well. Oh my goodness, they can do their job so much better. So this is a huge part. This tools aspect is a huge part of a high impact supervision, because hopefully it's happening outside of that once a month touch point. But especially to make sure, we want to make sure, we don't want to throw that up to chance. We have a touch point so that we can ensure that every DSP is getting every tool that they need from their frontline supervisor. We're having a touch point between managers and frontline supervisors so that every frontline supervisor has every tool that they need to do their job and to do it well. I think you're catching the picture here. The third defining feature of high impact supervisions is rewards. We want the experience itself to be rewarding, and we want to be pointing direct reports towards the rewards that they're earning. In other words, incentivize all kinds of best practices. This can be done very informally, where one supervisor just throws buys everybody breakfast or coffee, or does some small act to show appreciation when staff have just accomplished. It could be a lot of different things. They just accomplished that they made it through a really difficult week, and so it's Monday morning. Probably no one's looking forward to being back at work. I mean, of course they probably are, because your workplace is so awesome, but it's a Monday. And so getting everybody coffee that morning to just say, you did a great job last week. We held it together. We got some of our staff returning from their PTO this week. It should not be as short-staffed. Everything from that to you can create incentives. Some of this might involve some HR involvement, where you could incentivize not having call-offs or people following the call-off procedure properly, or and then if that's happening, then what you want to do is during the supervision, you want to have a touch point. I'm sorry, I didn't say that clearly. During the supervision, bring it up with the direct report. Remind them, hey, You're doing great over the last 30 days. You only got one more month to go until you get that quarterly bonus for accomplishing X or Y or Z. In other words, the supervisor gets to jump on the bandwagon of this policy or this procedure that's in place to reward employees, and they can highlight that in those high impact supervisions. And the last component of rewards, it's still under this broader category of rewards, is talking very plainly and clearly with direct reports about how their best practices, their actions are creating all these wins for the clients, for the people that are being served. And that many people find that a very rewarding experience as well. Listen, I actually dive much more in depth into these features of high impact supervisions in episode 3. I break down the mechanics of what that supervision meeting looks like, how to execute it, and how to work it within whatever supervision structure you have in place already. So by all means, check out episode 3 for more information on that. Which leads us right to the question of the day. How can you get all of your supervisors and managers, anybody that has people that report to them, how can you get them all aligned on implementing high impact supervisions? Well, here are the steps to implementing this as a system. Number 1, modeling. I hope this was obvious, but maybe it wasn't, and it's okay. We actually need to show everyone else in the organization how important it is by our actions, not just by creating a system or a policy or all the other things we're going to talk about. We want to model this behavior. In other words, whoever reports to you, they should love their supervision time with you. They should love when you have that touch point, whether it's monthly or whether it's more frequently. They should love it. And the reason they should love it is because you're doing the stuff. You're doing the feedback. You're doing the tools. You're doing the rewards. And modeling that is so important, because what we want is we don't just want to try to set something up for, those people over there, or for, the frontline supervisors. They're not doing what they need to do, so we want to help them get their act together, or something like that. No, we want to model it so that the closer people come to the upper level management within the organization, the more that they see, wow, there's really high impact supervisions that are happening. So, modeling, very important. The second step in this system is training. Listen, if we value the results, we need to honor the process of learning and growing. If we want the results of people doing high impact supervisions, we should not assume that they already know how to do that or what that is. And it's not enough just to talk about it once or twice at some kind of a manager's meeting or a supervisor's meeting. We want to actually have a full-on training about it where there's some role play and where there's feedback. For some of the supervisors on your team, this is probably going to come very naturally. They're probably doing most, possibly all of the steps or the features of a high-impact supervision. And they're probably also getting the results of it. But not everyone on the team is likely to be doing it. Plus, you're creating language around it so that not only, in the end, are you not only going to have managers or higher level management keeping the frontline supervisors accountable, but you can even have peers that start to keep each other accountable by they're learning it together, and then they are all falling under the same expectations. So having a one, maybe 2 training times, it's not difficult. It shouldn't take real long, but it needs to be honored with that time to actually learn it, to help some of the supervisors in particular grow those skills. That involve things like active listening, asking good questions. Again, more info on that in episode 3. Not to bounce you over there too much, but yeah, train on it. Another aspect of training, or another part of that, can also be providing real-time work with. And so you may have an upper level or mid-level manager that goes into a supervision with one of their direct reports, who would be like that frontline supervisor, while the frontline supervisor is conducting a supervision meeting. In other words, they're working with them, right? It's one thing to learn it in the lab. It's another thing to learn it in the applied setting. Things take better in that applied setting. And so that'd be very important. And then just a last consideration with the training is that it's important to explain the rationale to the whole team so that everyone can see the why and connect it for your team to reducing turnover and reducing those fires. There are so many less fires to put out when we're having these high impact supervisions. Why? Because in them, clear, honest, open communication will be happening. Workers will be getting the tools that they need. They'll be sharing challenges that their supervisor can help them overcome or can help troubleshoot in various different ways. They'll be getting connected to the rewards. In other words, they're going to be more engaged, more bought into, what's in it for me? I see now why engaging in keeping up to date on my trainings or why showing up to work on time. I knew it was the right thing to do before, of course, but now I see this is what I get out of it. I'm working towards a $10 gift card, or we're all as a team working towards the pizza party at the end of the month, or whatever it is. Hugely, hugely, hugely important. You want all of your supervisors to buy into this, and you'll also want to. So you're training on it, but you want them bought in as to the why. Okay, the third step. Again, these aren't 100% sequential necessarily because you can sort of start to provide some of this third step before you go full on with the training, but they go well hand in hand. The third step, accountability. Make sure that there's accountability, that supervisions are happening. I mean, touch points are even happening in the first place, especially at that frontline staff, frontline supervisor level, but then also including some kind of quality measures that, let me just dive into this on a couple of different aspects of what this looks like. Let me play it out. You can provide a self-checklist for supervisors that includes the components of a high-impact supervision that they're just filling out each time they're having a supervision. Or if you already have a supervision form that your supervisors are expected to fill out, and listen, I'm not just talking about a quarterly or semi-annual performance evaluation. I don't mean it like that. I'm talking about every time that they have any kind of a sit-down with their direct staff. Do they have a checklist? If so, you could work these components into that, or you could have this as its own thing if there's not already some checklists or some system in place that you have for that. The flip side of it, so that's something you would give to the supervisors as a way of providing some accountability. Maybe they turn that in then to their manager, their boss. The flip side of that is having some kind of a simple form. It could be even using just Google Forms where direct reports fill out just a little bit of feedback on how their supervisions are going. I know, one more form. That's just what we all wanted. Yay, hooray, another form to fill out, more paperwork. Thank you, Nate. I'm getting very excited about your podcast right now. Yeah, not quite like that. What I do mean is, if it matters, we have to measure it. And so another way to measure it is to have the staff, like the direct reports, the ones attending or in that way participating, have them give feedback on how it's going. Maybe they're not doing this every single time. Maybe they're doing it once a quarter, but have them give feedback. That will certainly provide accountability. If someone that reports to me is then filling out a form about how I'm doing with my supervision time with them, and that's going to some kind of upper boss or somebody above me, wow, yeah, that's going to make me feel like, oh, I should probably do this better. And we can also have then a third level where the accountability can take place would be the manager or maybe it's upper manager, depends on how you're structured, they may have also a checklist for each of the frontline supervisors that they oversee, who reports to them. And they can work that. This could be an aspect of their own high impact supervision with the supervisor. Okay, these words are starting to blend together. I hope you're picturing what I'm saying. A frontline supervisor has a boss, and their boss could have a checklist where every time they meet with that frontline supervisor, they're asking, how is it going? Tell me about your supervision meetings with your staff. And not just in a general sense, but have some specific benchmarks around that. A few quality measures on this could include just regularly looking at the turnover rate. Now that's a lagging measure. So then looking at the lead measure, the call-offs rate, how are call-offs, tardiness going? That's a pretty big indicator. Or attendance in other things as well can sometimes show up. You could even have a quality measure around fires, or that's how would you define that? Well, if a supervisor, let's just say they have a simple checklist that each week they fill out, maybe at the end of the day, maybe at the end of the week. How many different little mini crises between, that basically came down to the staff were you dealing with this week? And from my experience, there are some programs where there's almost never a week that goes by where there's not some kind of fire that a supervisor either needs to put out or should put out or fails to put out, but it's still happening. And so they can start to track that, and hopefully they would see that reduce over time as they're investing in their frontline staff through these high impact supervisions. Okay, last step in implementing a system where you can get everybody on board with implementing high impact supervisions. Last step, you probably guessed it, rewarding, recognizing. So reward the supervisors, whether you're talking frontline supervisors, whether you're talking about the managers, reward everyone who's doing this for doing it. There can be small but clear incentives for a frontline supervisor to have all their supervision meetings completed, like they actually happened, right? In the busyness and the chaos of it all, it didn't just fall through the cracks. So it just happened that they met with them. And then B, you could even up that or make the incentive a little sweeter if they completed the checklist, the high impact supervision checklist each time. Then boom, then they get a little bit better incentive. That could be a little gift card, again, a little party. You could you can kind of take it in a more playful, fun direction with, making plaques or superlatives or, mini trophies or whatever. It can be a fun thing. It should be a fun thing, but it should be meaningful to whoever's receiving it. And one other way would be to, if you want to send it out at the staff level or the DSP level, send out a nomination form, once a month. It might be too much. Once a quarter, between once a month, once a quarter, for staff to shout out their supervisor for doing awesome meetings. And it can be very simple, but you could send that out and then, just recognize the supervisors who get some feedback from their direct reports about how they are loving the meetings that they're having when they meet with their supervisor. So yeah, there you have it. Model, train, provide accountability, and then reward and recognize. 4 steps you can implement high impact supervisions throughout your organization, reduce the fires in a major way. Here's my suggested action step for you today. I would recommend focusing on the accountability aspect and the rewards recognition aspect. Assume for the moment that you're already modeling it, and if you're not, that's just so easy within your power to change it. And let's just assume for a moment you're going to get that training done so that everybody, all your supervisors, frontline and managers, everybody's going to get on the same page about this. They're going to get trained up on it. Assume all that. How would you track high impact supervisions in your current context? How would you track it? What would you do to provide accountability? I threw out a few suggestions earlier. Pick one or more than one, but that you can start to implement right away. How are you going to track it? And then the other action step would be, how could you incentivize your supervisors for completing high impact supervisions? Not just that they're having supervisions, yes, that's good, but that they're doing it with this new model, with this new way of including the rewards, tools, and feedback. There you go. Listen, I've got a free tool I'm offering for you, and the goal here is to help you take your next step on the quest to reduce turnover in your organization. What's the tool? Well, I created a free PDF download entitled The Top 10 Questions to Help You Solve DSP Retention and the answers to get you there. If you want to download that, it should help to point you in the right direction so that you can start to know exactly where to start targeting retention efforts at your organization. You can find it at iddleader.com/top10. That's iddleader.com/top10. TOPTEN, not the numerals, but the word spelled out 10. And if you found this podcast helpful, I want to ask, would you think about and would you maybe consider paying it forward? The best way to pay it forward is to share this podcast with someone you know that would benefit. You're not alone, and we're not alone. There's other people having these same challenges. Maybe you can think of someone that's a firefighter. They're, a leader within this industry, but they act like a firefighter because of all the crises that are chronically happening. Send it to that person. They will thank you for it. Or you can also pay it forward to someone that you may or may not ever meet, which would be the person that discovered this podcast because you rated and reviewed it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you're listening to this podcast. If you did that, I would greatly appreciate it. Hey, until next time, Difference Maker, here's to you. Keep up the amazing work.